We're asking the question, why God? Now, I was once an atheist. In high school, I went through this kind of tumultuous time. I grew up believing in God. You guys have heard my testimony probably before, that when I came to a point in high school that I didn't think I believed in God anymore, I didn't want to believe in God, I actually told God, you don't exist anymore. So that's how you know you grew up in the church, right? You know, I couldn't just walk away. It had to be like, hey, you stay there. Because I had this, it was ingrained in me, this belief since I was a kid. And I got to a place where I didn't believe in God anymore, and I considered myself an atheist. And through a series of circumstances, and especially because life without God was particularly somewhat meaningless, and I know that's not everyone's experience, and I know some people have left the church and even found meaning, but for me, there was a meaninglessness, and through a series of events, I was brought back into the church. But the interesting thing that I'll share with you this evening to get your attention is that I still am an atheist.
What?
All right, so I'm going to let that hang there because I really think that's a true statement, and it's also going to keep you interested in what I have to say here. But I do consider myself an atheist. Now, there's this man, and back when I was a little more interested in the philosophies of atheism, there's this man named Richard Dawkins. And Richard Dawkins, if you have done any reading into atheism, is, depending on who you ask, kind of a leading voice in this generation of atheists. And he's known for a book called The God Delusion. And in that book, there was this super interesting quote that will always stick with me. And he said, everyone has gods they don't believe in. Atheists just go, one God more. Okay? So everyone is atheists when it comes to a certain God. By the way, the word atheist, if you break it down, the word theos is the Greek word for, anyone? God. And then put the A at the beginning, it negates it, okay? So no God, I don't believe in this. But there's a lot of gods out there, right? Depending on what religious tradition you belong to. So what he's saying is that we all have gods we don't believe in. I just go one further and don't believe in that God either. We're going to put a pin in that as we go. But one of my professors at the seminary, Dr. Oliver Glanz, said something that I thought was interesting as well. He said that atheists are like prophets. That you have these people who are coming and saying, this doesn't seem right, we protest it, right? And throughout the Bible, you have these characters who come in, and by the way, depending on the God who was being propagated at the time, there were a lot of kings in Israel's time that were promoting child sacrifice, to the point where there's a valley next to Jerusalem called the Valley of Hinnom. And in the Bible, when you see the word hell, it often is Gehenna, which is referring to this valley where all these child sacrifices were made, not by pagans, by God's people. Because the king at the time was promoting something like child sacrifice and promoting these pagan versions of God while still calling him Yahweh. And so a prophet would come in and protest this version of Yahweh. He was an atheist to that God, though he did believe in the true God of the Bible. This character here is Ryan Bell. Now, Ryan Bell was a pastor at the Hollywood Seventh-day Adventist Church in California. And Ryan Bell was known for being a kind of progressive and kind of, being very active in the community socially and all of that. But it shocked the world one year when he announced publicly that he was having doubts in God. Do you remember this story? That he was having doubts in God, and so he very kind kind of famously and publicly went on this year without God. He gave it a nice catchy title and everything. And he wrote a blog, and people were making a movie about him, and it was just this whole big thing where he was exploring atheism like purposefully. I want to know if I can learn something here, because it's not something that I've ever really gone out and learned about. And I remember reading about it and actually feeling like excited for him, because for me, my time as an atheist, my time in high school when I walked away from religion, it actually was good for me, because it gave me a chance to step back from my parents' religion. And by the way, it's my religion now, but it wasn't. You know what I mean? When you grow up and your parents are telling you this is what you should believe, but you don't necessarily, it's not yours. You don't own it. So it gave me an opportunity to step away and to clear my head. And when I came back, it was real. I did it because I wanted to. And it was meaningful. And I felt like I met Jesus for the first time. So it was a really positive thing. And I thought, Ryan, go out there. You know, some people just stay in the church their whole lives and they never really make it their own. And I was disappointed. I was crushed, because over the year, it became more and more evident that he wasn't coming back. And after a year, he did make an announcement saying, I've decided to remain an atheist. And now he's working in different social programs and things like that. He's found meaning in other ways, but he didn't come back to his belief in God. And it was sad to see that someone who was a prominent figure, a pastor in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, a Christian pastor, left his faith like that, and very publicly, to the point where, you know, you hate to see in the news a pastor walk away, because then it's even more reason not to. Well, to the world, this is an old thing, walking away from God. It's not a new thing. People have been doing it for a long time, right? Does anyone know who this picture is, or who's in this picture? This is Friedrich Nietzsche. Okay, Friedrich Nietzsche is a famous philosopher, atheist, right? And he's famous for saying the words, "God is dead, and we have killed him." It's not just that he faded away; it's that we did it. And what he meant when he said that was, we've grown past, you know, like he said it mournfully, like almost like he wished that there was a God, but you know what? Like we've just gotten too far to believe in that silliness anymore. I wish that I could, but we killed him, right? We studied science to the point where we know that obviously this isn't true. We've gotten to the place where we're more developed and evolved than that. So he said it, you know, he gets quoted often, but you miss out on the fact that he's actually really kind of sad that this is the case, but he finds it to be a true reality. God is dead, and we have killed him. And by the way, have you ever heard of a self-fulfilling prophecy? Now, I don't believe in an ever-burning hell. That's me. I believe in an eternal separation from God, for those who don't choose him, right? But I don't believe in an ever-burning hell. And so for me, in my belief, if I choose that there is no God and that when I die, I just perish, kind of like in The Lion King, right? Become the grass, and then the antelopes eat the grass and all that, right? If I choose that, am I any different than an atheist? Or am I any different? Is the fate for me any different than a fate for an atheist if that's what I choose to believe? No, it's the same. It's one and the same. So what I'm saying is, if you choose to believe that God is dead, if you choose to believe that there is no God, well, you get that. You've self-fulfilled that prophecy, because you won't go anywhere after you die. There is nothing beyond this life. And if you want to be content with that, you know what? I think that God wants us to have what we want. If you look in the book of Romans, you find that God's wrath is him giving us over to the things that we think we want. It's not the things that are good for us, but the things that we want. So Nietzsche said God is dead. And by the way, should God be alive? Now, when I ask this, what I mean is, are there actually some really good reasons not to believe in God? Now, let me couch that with this. Are there a lot of really damaging teachings about who God is? This is the God, right? You see him. He's kind of angry looking, really powerful, right? But this is the God that people leave church over. My parents, who are tuning in right now, my parents left the church because, and this is independent, before they met each other, and both left the church because God was angry and he wanted to destroy them if they didn't do exactly what he wanted them to do. It was this vengeful God. And by the way, this has been preached not just accidentally, but on purpose for a long time. If you've ever heard the famous sermon, Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God, it depicted a sinner as someone on a string being dangled above the fire, and you better watch out or God's going to get you, right? There's the version of God that has predestined everything you do, and that you're a robot, right? And what that means is you're either a robot and you can't help but do good things and go to heaven, or you're a robot who's been programmed the other way to God's glory. And I'll just be a robot and go to hell with no choice because God wants to prove a point. Right? There's a lot of damaging views of who God is that make people leave the church. And so it makes us ask the question, why God? Why should we believe? Is there any merit to this anymore? Is there any reason why we keep going through these motions? Is there any reason why we keep reading books that are thousands of years old when we could just pick ourselves up by the bootstraps and move on? Why should we believe? Well, one benefit, I was reading a book, and this is not a religious book, but it's very fascinating. Kind of a tough read, but if you like tough reads, read Liquid Modernity by Zygmunt Bauman, okay? Liquid Modernity by Zygmunt Bauman. And what he does is he's writing a book about what postmodernism is, right? Postmodernism being what came after modernism, and that's to a degree where we are right now. Now, postmodernism has done away with every comfort, every cushion in life because it says you can't rely on it, right? We used to be able to believe in God, right? And that in everything that we needed to know, we opened up a book and there it was, right? Is that comforting? Because you can just say, what do I do in this situation? And you look at the book and the book tells you this is how it's supposed to be. This is how you live your life. You know you're a good person because you just did this. So congratulations, right? You have that feeling of comfort knowing that you did what was right. Now, modernism came in and killed God. Friedrich Nietzsche, right? Came in and killed God and replaced him with science, replaced him with government, replaced him with, right, these institutions. But we've gotten to a place now where even those things that replaced God are shaky. You know, we see that even though science has made amazing contributions, right? We cannot, especially when you look at the medical world, you can't deny that science has made wonderful contributions to our life and made it better and helped us understand the world around us. But we also know there's so much we don't know. And we ask the question, will we ever know everything because of science? Can you experience everything? Can you repeat every scenario? Oh, it's okay. Can you repeat every scenario? Can you make everything happen by the scientific method? The answer is no. You can't repeat evolution. You can't repeat deep space and time. You can't. There are so many assumptions and so many things that you have to make a decision to just believe at some point. That some people are saying science is as bad as religion. And when it comes to government, well, you can choose to have a positive view of government, but hey, do you know anyone who trusts politicians just like outright anymore? Like, oh, this person was elected by due process, and so he has the right to just, make these decisions. No, everyone protests. Everyone has issues with the government now. And even back when we thought, well, we'll replace God with the state. Even then, the only reason people believed was because you had to or else, right? You had to or else. And that's why they ousted God, because they didn't need anything getting in the way of belief in the state, right? They didn't need any reason to rise up. And by the way, the Bible talks about rising up. It actually does. So they didn't need that encouragement, right? So why believe it? This book by Zygmunt Bauman, Liquid Modernity, talks about how the biggest fear, the biggest concern in our world today is there's no big brother watching us. There's no scientific surety. There's no assurance that God is watching over us and guiding our steps. Instead, we just live in a world where we kind of float around wondering what the right decision is. If we're ever good people, or actually are we bad? We don't know. We've done away with titles like good and bad. We've done away with titles like male and female. We've done away with titles like any titles. Throw them all away because it's meaningless. There's no longer any meaning for people anymore. And when you don't live in a world with meaning, well, look at the shootings that are happening. Look at the suicides that are happening. We just heard another story recently, a large profile story of a pastor who was not only a pastor, but also a mental health consultant who just killed himself, right? Because we're in a world where we've taken all the meaning out of everything. There's nothing to guide us anymore. There's nothing to catch us if we fall. So do we need God? Well, maybe not, but here's what I am proposing. Maybe, right? And here are the two options. You can either believe in nothing, or you can choose to believe in something. I choose to believe in something tonight, friends. And it could be science, it could be the government, but honestly, I find the most comfort in religion. I find the most comfort in God. So we have these two options: believe in nothing or believe in something. You might know this pastor. This is Pastor Ty Gibson. Pastor Ty Gibson is a pastor out in the state of Oregon, and he tells this story that you may have heard before. It's kind of a famous story, but the story about how he was sitting on an airplane next to a man, and he was reading a book, and it was a book about the Bible. And the man looked over, noticed the book, realized he must have been a Christian, and said, "Oh, I don't believe in God." That's how he started the conversation. I don't believe in God. That's silly. And he said, "Oh," and he closed the book, and he said, "Well, tell me about the God you don't believe." And he said, "Well, I just don't believe that someone would, just be so selfish that if everyone didn't do exactly what he wanted them to do, that he would throw them into hell, and all this punishment and all this and that." And he started painting a picture of a God that many of us would take issue with, right? And as he's listening to him, and as he's listening to all these scathing details, he finally responds with, you know what? I don't believe in that God either. I'm an atheist too. Because if God is who you just described, then I don't believe in him either. But he said, what if a God existed that was the complete opposite of what you just described? What about a God that was pure love and sheer beauty? What about a God who would rather die than ever do anything wrong to anyone? What about a God who wants the best outcome for everyone all the time? If that God existed, would you want to believe in him? And the man thought about it for a second and said, well, I guess I'd have to be a fool not to believe in that God. The point of the story is there might be something better than what we've heard. There might be something better than what we now can we just make up the God that we want to serve? That might just be as dangerous, right? But if God exists and he is good and not this evil character that we've heard of all of our lives, then that would be significant, wouldn't it? I went up to the city with my brother-in-law. This is my brother-in-law, Kim. Went up to the city and showed him around, and I was taking lots of pictures, and I just like going downtown and showing people around. I took him to this statue. Does anyone know what this statue is called? Right. This is the bronze Fonz. The bronze Fonz. It commemorates the Fonzarelli, right? Arthur Fonzarelli, the Fonz from the show Happy Days, which is set in Milwaukee. And of course, it's played by actor Henry Winkler. And so I've got a picture of my brother-in-law next to the statue. And, we kind of talked a little bit about Henry Winkler and his acting career. And the conversation nearly ended, but I said, too bad he's dead. And my brother-in-law took issue with it. And he said, he's not dead. I just watched an interview with him the other day. I said, no, I'm pretty sure he's dead. But because I'm a millennial and because I had my phone on me, I looked it up really quick. And sure enough, Henry Winkler is alive and well. But I was vindicated by my search, because what I found also was that people were sharing articles that he was dead. And I was scrolling through Facebook one day, and I saw Henry Winkler dead at age, I don't know. It was fake news anyway. Henry Winkler dead. And I saw it, said, that's sad, and moved on with my life and accepted it as truth. Now, what I want to propose is that God is like Henry Winkler in this scenario. Because many people hear this statement, God doesn't exist, God is dead, God is not good, right? We hear these things and we just keep scrolling. We just keep going on with our life and we accept it as truth, even though it is fake news. And what I want to propose is that we need to go to a source where there's actual true news, actual good news. But my question for you is there a source like that out there? How do we know what's true and what's not? By the way that people find their truth today is they go to any random blog, right? And they, oh, this sounds great. This seems right? People don't want to go to experts anymore. People don't want to go to people with doctorates. People don't want to go to people with titles. This person seems to know what they're talking about, right? People go to any corner of the internet. They go to any member of their friend group, and they look for meaning. They look for truth. They look for purpose, but it's not always there. A lot of times it's fake news, and a lot of times we need something more than that. So what I want to propose is that we need to go to a place where we can actually find true news. Now, I have a picture of the Bible here, and we're going to get there, okay? Because we're starting out right now, and we're talking, is there a God? Why believe in God, right? What I want to propose is that what we do as we go throughout this series, and what I want to ask that you would do with me as we go on this journey together, is I want to ask that you choose, whether it's out of convenience for the series and for argument's sake, or whether it's because you really do believe, that you choose to believe that there is a God and that he's better than what we've heard. He's better than those stories about a God who just wants to torture and kill, right? He's better than that. And that there has to be a source out there somewhere where we can find out this good news about him. Okay, so that's what I'm asking. If you're watching here today, or if you're on the live stream, suspend the doubt and choose to believe, so that as we go forward, we can pursue, where do we find this truth? Where do we find this? And it could be in the Bible. What we're going to do is we're going to talk tomorrow night, and I want to encourage you, tune in tomorrow at 7, because we're going to be asking the question, why the Bible, right? And you could just as well ask why the Quran, or why not the Bhagavad Gita, right? There are all these sources that people find wisdom and people find meaning and people find their beliefs about God in. Why the Bible? Of course, I'll put my bias out there. I believe in the Bible. I'm a Christian, right? And so I'm excited to look at this question. But the question is, why not anything else? So is the Bible where we can find this information, or is it somewhere else? We're going to talk about that tomorrow night. And so I'm excited as we continue through this series to continue asking questions, to continue asking why. Because these are important questions. Do you believe that? Whether God exists or not is actually quite important. And I know a lot of people are agnostics and they like to say, well, God might exist, but I'll just kind of put him in the back closet because I don't want to have to think about it. But at some point in our life, we all have to make a decision. Do we choose or do we not choose to go along with that? So what I'm asking is, what I'm proposing is that it is important that we do choose to believe in God. And that tomorrow we're going to look, is the Bible a place that we can find this true information or not? And so I want to ask you to tune in then.